Hi class, Mr. Clark here. Today I've got a short video for you on creating and attaching our antlers, horns, claws, spikes, things like that to your creature. For this project, you're gonna need some aluminum foil, you're gonna need your Polymer clay, you're gonna need your sculpture tools. You also want a piece of cardboard to be actually sculpting on, as well as some scissors. Now I'm just using our white Sculpey clay, but you could use any kind of Sculpey clay that you wanted. It really doesn't matter the color. We're gonna be painting these at the end, so whichever color you get is fine. I'm just using white because that's what we got. Now to start off, we're going to create the central bone of our antler horn out of aluminum foil, kind of like this, a nice big one. And if you are doing two antlers, I would do both of these at the same time to make sure that they stay the same size. So you're just gonna rip off a piece of aluminum foil. It doesn't need to be much, and you can always trim this with the scissors as needed. So start kind of crumpling it up into that antler shape. And this one is gonna be very big. I'm definitely gonna have to need to cut this one down with my scissors. It's much longer, but what I can do is I've got my first one here that I like the size of. I can use that to help me measure and then just use my scissors to cut it off. And then I can come back in and kind of refine and get it so that they are almost exactly the same size. Now, the next thing that you're going to want to do is create all of the little breaks for your antler. So any of the points that you want to be having coming off, 3 tends to work nicely. Same process, you'll just come in, get a very small piece of aluminum foil, crumple it up until it gets to a nice size. What I like to do is kind of get a bigger piece and then snip it directly in half. That way I've already got both pieces for both antlers that I want to create. So this one might be the piece right there, and this one could be here. And I'll do that 2 more times to create all the pieces that I want for my antler points. That one didn't work out quite so well, so just get another piece of aluminum foil. Crumple it up nicely. And then cut it in half for our next break. And then one final one, nice and small for the top. And I've already got one that I'm just going to cut in half for that. And be careful, they do tend to like to shoot off depending on the scissors that you're using. All right, so that looks like it would be a pretty good underlayer for my aluminum foil for those antlers. Now, next I'm going to go ahead and wrap all of them in our Polymer clay. So I'm going to quickly kind of extend out almost like a tube and wrap this all the way around so that it's completely covered in our clay. And I'm going to set off my other antler off to the side because I'm only going to really do one. But you want to, if you're doing 2, you definitely want to make sure that you've got both of them so that you can be working with both antlers and so that your creature doesn't only have one pair of horns. Now, if you don't want to do a full antler, if you just want to do horns, you'd only need to do this one step. You wouldn't have to do all of the breaks, but a lot of people like doing the antlers, so that's what we're going to do since it's the hardest version of that horn. If you're just doing a rhino horn or a unicorn spike or any kind of solo horn, this would be the only step that you need to do, and then the final step that we do when you attach it to our actual creature. Just making sure this whole thing is nice and covered. All right, looks fine for now. All right, and I'm going to keep going and making all of these last pieces completely enclosed in that polymer clay. Before I start trying to put them together. It's very important that they're all connected with the polymer clay first, so that way it's not too difficult to actually start attaching them once we're done. And if you have one that's starting to kind of get really floppy like that one, just go ahead and sculpt another one. That way you have a nice hard skeleton for your antler. The whole point of doing this is, since the polymer clay is very squishy and it's hard to keep the points of it, this way we can keep the points of our antler nice and sharp, or at least sharper than they would be without the actual aluminum foil underneath them. All right, so I'm almost done getting all of my antlers connected. All right, once you've got them all completely covered in the aluminum foil, we'll start attaching. And I like to start at the top and work my way down. It just tends to be a little easier that way. So I will take another piece of my polymer clay and roll it out into a long kind of skinny tube and set that off to the side. I'm going to use that in just a second. And then I'll take my piece that has my aluminum foil in it and put it exactly where I want it to go and just kind of squish it on there for this second. I'm not going to be using anything just right now. And then I'll come back with that tube that I made a second ago and wrap it around my antler and then start to squish it in place. Then I'll take my sculpture tool and actually come back in here and start sculpting around and up on that antler to blend them and merge them into one piece of clay. This step is very important, otherwise your antlers are just going to fall off. All of those horns and parts of your creature won't be able to stay attached if you don't attach them correctly. Shouldn't take too very long to get them attached, and now I've got my first part of my antler done, and I'm moving on to my second part. About halfway down, start the same way, kind of just squish it on there. I forgot to make my tube first, so I'll do that now. And these don't need to be super long or super thick tubes, but they do need to be able to go all the way around your antler in one go. This one's going to be way too long, so all you need to do is just kind of pull it till it breaks off, or you can use your clay tool and kind of cut off the extra. All right, then I'm coming back with my clay tool and blending them all together, kind of merging them into one piece. Don't worry if you accidentally bump the tip of your antler and it becomes not quite as sharp. We'll refine everything once we get all the points in, so that everything looks nice and nice. All right, and then my final one, I'm going to have down here for my antler. It looks good. Make sure you've got your tube, kind of wrap that around. Yeah, and blend them together. And as I go, I kind of check and make sure everything looks good. Looks like a pretty good antler so far. And that could be one of my creature's antlers. It's a little off if I was trying to match it with this one over here, but now I can come and kind of tilt it slightly, refine the points, making sure that everything stacks up nicely. If it looks a little thin down here, don't worry too much about that either. You can either just kind of bend up the aluminum foil to make it a little thicker, and then fill out the part that looks a little thin with your Polymer clay. Or just add a little bit more to the bottom if it's looking a little thin. At the base. Now, to attach this to your head, you want to go ahead and have any kind of facial features that you want on your creature done before you attach the antler, since it tends to be a little tricky to do your face once you've got antlers and stuff on. But don't worry too much. If you do the antlers first, you can always just use the clay tool and finish your face. But I would recommend doing it last. Now, once you are trying to get it on, it's pretty much the exact same thing we just did, only on a larger scale, to put it onto your creature's head. So you kind of squish it down and then make sure that you have a nice long tube that can go all the way around that point. All right, and then I will come in with my clay tool and blend them together. So that way they become one solid piece of Sculpey. Now, the nice thing about having done the aluminum foil under or inside of it, the aluminum skeleton, is it'll keep the points nice and sharp pretty much, unless you intentionally mess with them, a lot better than we could have without doing this. Trying to make this out of just the clay would just fall to pieces because the clay wouldn't be able to really support itself. All right, and there we have one of my antlers. Looks pretty good. Now, if you're trying to create a more realistic, like deer antler, the next step would be to add all of this texture and all of this detail towards the base, which we can easily do by just using our clay tool and kind of refining what we already did, just adding some texture lines, maybe poking in some of those areas to get it that kind of deer antler attached look. To get the kind of bump that a lot of deer have, what we can use is our sculpture tool, this one specifically that has this nice curved edge. We can come in and use the curved edge to press up our clay and then press down our second part to make it have that nice bumped edge that the real deer antlers have. You can just kind of bump it up. And if you're wanting to do this, definitely do it before you do the texture, so that way you can get it in one go. And if it starts to fall, you can always just kind of move it back up. And you would go all the way around and kind of refine it a little bit more. Now, you'll do the exact same technique for claws and spikes and any small attachments that you want to make onto your creature. If it's a small piece of spike kind of like this, instead of doing the entire wraparound, all you'll need to do is just add a little bit of extra to the bottom and then just squish it into place where you want it, and make sure to come back with your clay tool and kind of refine exactly where you want it to go. So now he's kind of got like a unicorn horn almost on the front of him. And then you could come back on your other side and finish off the other antler or whatever you have on your creature to finish off those pieces. And if it needs to be bent, the nice thing about the aluminum foil is you can use that to help you create that bend and create that attachment to get them all in place nice and easily so that you have a symmetrical design. It's also why we made 2 of the pieces when we started instead of only making 1. That way our creature will have matching sets of antlers. All right, that's going to be all for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one where I show you all different kinds of texture techniques to create your creature and make it a lot more lifelike.